What's going on, guys? Andy here, and today I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of new and beginner character designers make in the earliest stages of their creation. Now, before I get into it though, I do want to preface this by saying that I make this mistake a lot myself, and I've made it for several years now. So I'm no expert, just a student sharing what I learned with all of you. But that only means we're on this journey together. So what is the issue and how do we fix it? Let's get into it. Now, the biggest issue I see happens in the initial stages of iteration and idea generation. Oftentimes we get ideas or a prompt and we dive into it really excited. We put down some sketches, but at a certain point that excitement and momentum can take us in the wrong path and we start to tunnel vision. We start varying the type of capes our character is wearing, or the different belts that hold their sword in place, or in general, we start to accessorize and adorn our characters differently. But what we sometimes fail to do is address the idea or prompt from a different angle. Because no matter how many different outfits we come up with for a single idea, the idea or approach is essentially the same. Now, before I show you what I mean, I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite part in the character design process? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect on that and learn from one another. With that, let's go ahead and jump back into it. So here I have an old example of art that I did nearly 6 years ago. It's of a time mage. You can see that in my early iteration, not really making any effort to, address the time mage theme, and I'm essentially playing a mix and match dress-up game. Now, in further iterations, I am again varying up her armor and patterning on her clothing. Now, looking back on this character, I feel like I could have been smarter of how I incorporate the theme of time and wizardry into her design. All of these iterations were just one single approach with many variations to the design. And quite frankly, I don't think any of them were that strong. Now here I have another example of a fire mage. Yes, it seems like I have a thing for magicians, but taking a close look at each of these designs, you can see a similar pattern. While I'm trying to vary the silhouette of the characters, the silhouette themselves don't really push the thematic of the character being a fire mage very well, which in itself is its own problem that we'll get into later on. But we can also see that each take on the design is following this overarching approach of a man with headwear and long draping clothes. The clothes might carry slight fiery motifs, and he wields a staff that gives him fiery powers. Now, if you ask me, it isn't really all that exciting, nor is it that unique. I think that is part of the issue, that our initial approaches don't dive deep enough to really create those more intricate and unique approaches. We settle for that singular track and, as I said, tunnel vision on an idea and focus on design rather than the concept and direction. So what do we do to address this? Mind mapping. So what is mind mapping and how do we get started? The way I think of mind mapping is creating a network of ideas relating to, an idea or several ideas that can get interconnected to one another. Let me show you. So let's say we have a prompt or an idea for a character. For this sake, let's create a new character together. Let's take, say, 2 to 3 words that will act as pillars for this character. So I think for this exercise, we're going to choose one word that alludes to their personality and underlying influence, and the other word we'll pick to describe their aesthetic or archetype. Now, I've been finding a lot of bird photos lately, so let's go with a peacock for one of the words, and for the other, we'll go with a knight or a paladin to step away from the, whole magician phase. Now, at this stage, feel free to look up references to spark some ideas, but the goal in doing this exercise is not really to begin visualizing our character. Our main focus is to throw ideas out and see which ones stick or creatively excite us. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Hey guys, Editing Andy here. To spare you guys some of the tedium of listening to me talk to myself, figured I'd do a little voiceover of what is happening in the background. So here I'm starting out with our original two words, peacock and night, and I'm essentially writing words and ideas that come to mind when I think of each of these separately. So for peacock, some words that came to mind would be feathers, colorful, long necks, etc. Anything that we associate with peacocks, I think, should be fair game in this exercise, even if you're not entirely sure. Like, do peacocks fly? Are they fast? I don't know, but I put it down anyways with a question mark. And actually, I still don't know. One sec. Okay, so it seems that they are fast and can sort of fly. All right, moving on. Once I have finished up the mind map for peacock, I repeat the same process for night. With night, I'm thinking of it in terms of potential time periods and what they might wear or how they might present themselves. Other things I think about here are things like associated ideas, things like dragons, castles, and princesses. Now, quite frankly, you may find that you have an easier time making the mind map for one word over the other. If you find that at some point you do need to do some research or find visual reference, make sure to do that. Just also be sure to not dig too deep and start, thinking about things like, oh, this pendant would look really cool, and start visualizing or building out a look for your character. Instead of doing that, maybe just write down the word pendant and move on. And when you think you're done with both words, go ahead, put the pen down, and review. So here we have our entire mind map built off of our two original words, peacock and night. From here, we can start to think of some ideas that excite us. And we're going to do that by taking words from both sides of this mind map and try to draw relationships between them. So looking at what we have, let's go ahead and see what kind of relationships we can build. As I review the mind map we've created, I am now also creating relationships from one side to the other, considering things like, wouldn't it be cool to have the feathers integrated with the weapon? Or maybe there is a way to have the feathers be weapons. Or even things like, what if the knight was a peacock and they're super decked out and cool as heck? And as crazy, bizarre, or intimidating as these ideas may sound, they're also exciting and going to be really fun problems to solve. And I think that's what makes certain characters so interesting. And I might even go as far to say that the more bizarre the idea, the better. So with this process and these ideas in the back of my mind, I am now creating all these different concepts and relationships that all sort of melt and mold together into what will eventually become 3 to 4 solid directions for this simple idea of combining a peacock and a knight together. So, what do we have? Here we have our mind map now condensed into 3 distinct ideas. So we have an idea where we have a knight riding a white peacock whose tail holds spears that the knight then hurls, and he also wields a talon-like shield for defense. And I believe this was going to be a more medieval-like approach. And then we have a peacock knight, where the knight is actually a peacock with a fan-shaped shield and sword with an eyeball-like design. And this one will also be medieval based with a feather-inspired helmet with some pom-poms coming out of it. And then our third idea is a sci-fi inspired knight with a cape and a fan-shaped spear with an attached flag. And this character is going to be strong, confident, and kind of flaunt his feathers. And we're also going to incorporate the feather design into the spear and cape. And then because it's tech wear, we'll probably have a bunch of colors and a holographic design. Now, I know for a fact that if I hadn't done this, I probably would have started with something kind of generic, like, feathers on the pauldron or just a really colorful rainbow cape. But by doing this, I feel like I have a larger scope of what is possible. And with that, I was able to intermingle common ideas into kind of foreign concepts. And now I have 3 very distinct directions I could take this initial prompt into. Now, if you're someone who is, say, building your own world and there are certain constraints such as race, access to certain materials, or maybe a very specific magic system, I encourage you to keep those in mind when doing this mind mapping process. That said, do not let it hinder you in being free with your ideas. Get creative and problem solve. Now, to summarize, an issue that I see often in the conceptual stage of a lot of beginner character designers is that their solutions and approaches seem to follow a single track. While I agree that at a certain point they should be, initially I find that we can get more depth if we can present ourselves with an additional 1 or 2 approaches. So to get around this, I found that using character mind maps to throw out ideas and intermingle different motifs helps address this problem, and I think that is what we've done here. Now, of course, there might be an idea here that really speaks to you and you just really want to explore. I encourage you to obviously explore that to the utmost potential, but don't disregard the other ideas that may have come out of this exercise, because in iterating on those ideas, even if it's briefly, you might get ideas that help fortify and strengthen the idea that you're really excited about. I hope this technique and this video helps you on your journey to creating awesome characters and exciting worlds. If you found this helpful, let me know by tapping that thumbs up button. In my next video in this series, I will cover the next step from this point and take you through my process for gathering specific references to help us iterate through these 3 ideas. So if you're interested in that and just following me and my art journey, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss when that video drops. I'm also trying to post more unfinished works on my socials, so be sure to follow me on my Instagram and Twitter for all that good stuff. With that, thank you for being here and watching till the end. I appreciate each and every one of you who watches my videos. Like always, I hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.